The Katsina State Governor, Aminu Masari, says the state's Commissioner for Science and Technology, Rabi Nasir, was assassinated. After a meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari, the governor told reporters that the killing had nothing whatsoever to do with banditry. He says the police and other security agencies are working to unravel what happened. He also speaks on the need for states in the Northwest to adopt a uniform policy in order to tackle the insecurity bedeviling the zone, instead of continuing to adopt different policies which will enable bandits and terrorists to always get away with crime.
Well, I think if we are talking about the issue of banditry, certainly we have seen some improvements. When we had a comparative analysis before the issuance of the security containment order, what we saw in 3 months when we compared, we saw a drastic drop of over 100% in terms of the rates of kidnappings, killings, and associated crimes with banditry. So the incidents we had last week had nothing to do with banditry attack. It was purely an assassination by unknown killers, which the police and other security agencies are working around the clock to unravel what had happened, because he was killed, my commissioner was killed by an unknown assassin, and not a single pin was stolen in his house.
And well, to discuss this developing stories, we're joined remotely by security expert Dr. Kabiru Adamu. Good evening, Dr. Kabiru. Good to have you on Newsnight. Well, let's start with the federal government naming some groups who they claim are supporting terrorist organizations. When I saw this story, this was not the list I was expecting. Remember, on October 1st, President Buhari announced that there was a federal lawmaker who is part of those who are supporting terrorist groups. And also, the AGF, Malami, also made that announcement a couple weeks later. And now this is announced and that lawmaker is not on this list. Is there any specific reason why that so-called lawmaker is being left out or not being named?
Okay, good evening. And just to correct, my name is Dr. Kabiru Adamu. We need to discuss this within the context of the announcement by the National Security Advisor. He made this revelation while meeting with clerics and other traditional rulers. In fact, in particular, ulamas that came from different parts of the country, and I think some from outside West Africa. Now, these three groups he mentioned are groups that, as far back as 1994, some of us that are within the security space have been monitoring their development. In particular, the ISGS has been a group we've morphed from Algeria into Mali and Mauritania, and over the last decade has morphed into several smaller groups with affiliation with both Al-Qaeda and to Islamic State in West Africa province. So within that context, I think the National Security Advisor was trying to urge the support of these clerics and ulamas. But as a security practitioner, I would hope that within the confines of the Office of the National Security Advisor, they would discuss the imperatives that are involved in intelligence. In other words, the who, that is who, how, through who, the individual that these groups are supporting the Nigerian terrorist groups. They don't do this, in oblivion. They do it through certain individuals. Then what? What are the means through which they support these groups in Nigeria? How do they do this support? If you recall, a few weeks ago, Giaba released this report, and it told us in clear terms how terrorism funding is being done in Nigeria and how money laundering is also being done in Nigeria. So I'm hoping that the National Office of the National Security Advisor would tie its statement with that Giaba report. And then lastly, the where. In other words, what location are these groups funding terrorist groups? So I'm hoping that beyond this public statement, these other cogent issues will be discussed within the confines of the Office of the National Security Advisor. Now, talking about local sponsors of terrorism, I believe that we need to sustain the pressure, and I must commend Arise TV for airing this and for also putting this issue on the front burner. I also expect other civil society organizations to continue to discuss this issue so that the government would name this, local sponsors of terrorism, and more beyond naming them, arrest them and prosecute them. Let's not forget that we've been told that I think about 400, if I remember well, BDC operators have been arrested, and months into their arrest, they are yet to be prosecuted. Their lawyers have submitted, have sued the government in particular over their fundamental human rights. So we're hoping that these issues be brought to the public so that Nigerians understand how government is actually approaching this issue, and beyond that, respect the rights of the accused. If it's important that I mention this, one of the drivers of terrorism or insecurity, as it were, is the alleged heavy-handedness and lack of respect for the rule of law by security officials.
All right, well, the security chief calls for reassessment of strategies both by foreign and regional governments and set aside what he called faulty assumptions. Help us understand what the NSA means by faulty assumptions and how this has impacted the fight. You may as well answer whether you hope or expect that as a group like IPOB was proscribed, that these three groups too will be proscribed.
Well, the US, as far as I know, has proscribed these groups, and that is where it worries me that Nigeria, as a regional power, has not galvanized other ECOWAS countries to move to take more cogent action on the activities of this group. ECOWAS, as far back, has a plan, action plan on terrorism. The action plan is supposed to run from 2020 to 2024. And I think, if I remember well, it's meant to have a fund of about $2.4 billion. But till date, I think only about $400 million have been gathered for that. So Nigeria needs to galvanize the other 15 member states of ECOWAS to ensure that this action plan is implemented fully. I've gone through the action plan, and it's a very, very good plan. It speaks about both what we call countering violent extremism, which, by the way, Nigeria has an amazing strategy on that, countering violent extremism. So we need to make sure that the other countries, and this is where I think the Office of the National Security Advisor, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Intelligence Agency, would work with other neighboring countries to ensure that all of this is being done jointly, with the hope of taking actions like proscribing these groups, identifying their members, and arresting them, with the support, of course, of international partners like the US and France that have enormous resources within the region. Beyond that, I think it's very difficult for any country to, on its own, move to address these issues of terrorism. Terrorism is global. The funding of terrorism is global, and that is why reports like that of GIABA that I mentioned earlier on are instrumental. And remember, it's ECOWAS that actually, authorized that report. And so I think the Office of the National Security Advisor should consider, for instance, using multilateral platforms like that of ECOWAS and bilateral platforms between Nigeria and our neighboring countries to strengthen our approach to counterterrorism.
And quickly, Dr. Adamu, moving on to Katsina State's governor's meeting with President Buhari. He says the state commissioner for science and technology was assassinated, and he really insisted on saying he maintained and reiterated that he was assassinated. He had nothing to do with banditry. And at the same time, he said the police and other security agencies were still trying to unravel what happened. So is there a preliminary finding that we don't know about that says that this is really an assassination? And truly, it's not even good news that it's assassination, and it has nothing to do with banditry, seeing as 2023 is just around the corner.
But let me be optimistic here and give him the benefit of the doubt. He is the chairman of the State Security Council. and has access to intelligence from different parts of the security architecture within the state. So it's possible that he's got intelligence, but I must also caution him to be mindful of statements that may portray his I've already had, statements coming in about him defending the bandits, as it were, by trying to, say that they are not the ones that are behind it. I think he should allow the various components of the security department to be the ones making such statements, and hopefully they will present evidence to show why they are reaching that conclusion. But having said that, irrespective of who is behind the assassination, it is ridiculous. It is embarrassing. This is the commissioner, and they entered his house and killed him. And how many days after the incident, nobody has been arrested. It is not just embarrassing. It's scary that someone at the high level of a commissioner would this will be done to him. What more of the ordinary person in Nigeria? So I believe that the governor should be a little bit circumspect in reaching such statements and conclusions. He's talked about cooperation between the state governors that are, at the height or the hotspots of this banditry. I'm fully supportive of that. The forests where these gunmen, bandits, terrorists hide traverse about 4 or 5 states, and in fact they also traverse our neighboring countries, Niger, and to an extent, depending on where you are, Cameroon. And so these 5 governors should come together and adopt a template that would help them in addressing this issue. And I believe the federal government too needs to come in. Just like the governor of Sokoto State mentioned, there is a need to bring in Niger and possibly other countries like Chad and Cameroon into this, so that the movement of these bandits, gunmen, would be stopped across our border. Their weaponry, the funding that they get, comes across from across the border into Nigeria. So whatever we do internally, if we don't take measures, especially through diplomatic means, and ensure better border protection, then the results will not be as positive as we want them to be.
All right, thank you so much, security expert Dr. Kabiru Adamu, for your interesting contributions.